Hello, everybody. Simple astrology continues today with Scorpio, and I'm super ready to do Scorpio. So those of you who have been watching my other videos, you know that we have reached above the horizon in the zodiac wheel. We did that last time when we moved into Libra, and now Libra, which a cardinal air sign, initiated us into um, the whole area of objective awareness, literally like a whole new dimension of being aware of reality from an objective point of view versus a more subjective point of view, which is the orientation of the first six houses, Aries, and the first six signs, Aries through uh, Virgo, and the first through the sixth house. So cardinal signs, being Libra, it's always their job to initiate something new. And the signs that follow them, in this case, Scorpio, as a fixed sign, is about bringing value, meaning, and purpose to what was initiated in the previous sign. In Libra, the initiation is relationships. We initiate relationships with people in our lives. We initiate all kinds of relationships. So this can be romantic relationships, it can be friendships, but ultimately it's opening the world of looking for what it means to have an equal relationship with someone, right? That's the idea anyway. Yeah, we meet as equals in Libra. And in Scorpio, what was initiated, getting together, and also Libra is about also figuring out what we want in a relationship. So there's a whole element of figuring out what we want and what we don't want. By the time we get to Scorpio, on a deep level, we know what we want. Our desires are strong, and now the question is about committing to those desires. But ultimately, being a fixed sign following Libra, Scorpio is about finding that value, meaning, and purpose in relationship. So it is about merging with other, which isn't always a person. It can be greater power sources. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes here. But it's about merging with something greater than myself so that I can have a union and that something greater can come from that, right? Scorpio is an archetype of power. It's the archetype of transformation. It is literally about letting go of the old and moving into the new. So Scorpio also is a water sign, and it's a yin sign. So this is very much an inside process of empowering ourselves at the deepest level, at the soul level. There's soul engagement when it comes to Scorpio. And Scorpio is not interested in superficiality. It is not interested in how things look on the surface. It wants to penetrate deeply inside to what is underneath the skin. It's into the guts of things. And at the deepest heart of Scorpio is the desire to confront any of our personal limitations and to be able to move through them into a more whole state of self. Scorpio really is, its modern ruler is Pluto, all about evolution. It literally is about stepping into the crucible, stepping into the fire of transformation, being willing to let go of what I've clung to, my security structures. What I've come to rely on is what's kept me safe, whether that's physical or emotional things, to step into the fire and let those things and let myself go, to experience moments of not being in control. So I'm going to back up a little bit here. Most of you probably know, maybe not if you're just tuning in, that I'm an evolutionary astrologer. So I was originally trained in the Jeffrey Wolf Green material, and I had just was looking back in his Pluto 1 book just last night in preparation for something else, and was kind of really getting into the Scorpio zone. And I hadn't read that in a long time. And so a couple things really jumped out at me, right? So here's one of them, or jumped out, or was a good reminder. Scorpio and the eighth house are the archetypes through which all of us come face to face with the limits or parameters of who we are, as opposed to who we are not and cannot be. So Scorpio is an archetype of confrontation, of everything we're made of. It's linked with the shadow because this confrontation with what we are is the deep desire, and desire is a really good Scorpio word, the deep desire to face what we are, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's, taboo, or when it feels like it's not appropriate, or actually when it feels just maybe like downright dark and maybe even dirty, right? These are good Scorpio words because the confrontation is with the parts of myself that I have pushed into shadow. And really, when we say shadow, all we mean is that whenever we reject parts of ourselves, they become part of our shadow. They don't leave, and they come along with us. They follow us around. And we then experience them typically outside of ourselves. We attract people and experiences where we meet our shadow because we haven't embraced it within ourselves. And when we do this process, how it shows up externally can be very distorted. And the more that we've suppressed or repressed those parts or rejected those parts, the more they have to fight to get our attention, right? And Scorpio, the challenge is, as I was saying, and I can't remember where I first heard this, but the idea that there's a dark night of the soul. There's not a dark night of the soul, because at the soul's level, no matter what it takes to evolve and transform and to self-empower in more true, genuine, authentic, whole ways, the soul doesn't care how that happens. It just has the deep desire to experience itself through the evolution. But the ego part of us really does care. And that's where it hurts. And that's where we have attachments. And that's where we, hold resentments and all these different things. So it feels like the dark night of the soul, but it's the dark night of the ego. And when you begin to align the ego part of yourself, the separate personality that we all create, by the way, so we can be a self, when we start to align that with the deeper soul's intention, a new source of power operates within us. It's not that it wasn't there before, but the activation or the harnessing of it can really happen through the conscious choice to grow. And the more that we get on board with that growth, the more that we see the underlying intention, the deeper need of what is really going on with us, the less traumatic the changing and the transforming is, the more gradual it becomes. With Scorpio type of energy, and it really doesn't matter, where it is in your chart. It could be planets in Scorpio, it could be planets in the 8th house, could be strong Pluto aspects. Wherever it is, man, you are changing, like from the inside out, deeply. And it's intense. But it doesn't always have to be cataclysmic. That tends to happen when we've resisted something more. When we're open to something, even when we don't quote unquote like it, there's room for gradual change, and it's less uncomfortable to our ego human self. Okay, so ultimately, Scorpio, it's looking to empower itself, but what can initially happen is, and this is true with all the fixed signs, they have some type of scarcity complex, meaning they believe there's not enough of something or they're lacking something. And for Scorpio, that's power. When we believe that we don't have enough power, or there's not enough power to go around, or we have to fight for power, it brings up all kinds of unhealthy relationships and power struggles and manipulations and dynamics where we try to get more power. We try to get more power from someone else because there might not be enough. You know, it's like the false belief that my power comes from outside of me, or that power ultimately comes from outside of me, that I'm not my own transformer, which is the ultimate highest expression of Scorpio, is to literally be a human transformer. So what can happen is with Scorpio energy, we can be very attracted and desirous of things that we see outside of ourselves as something that someone or something else has that we don't. But anything we see outside, we can only see because it's part of us. We just don't recognize that. So we go about trying to get it from Jimmy and Janie, or this belief system, or this knowledge, or a big pile of money, whatever. We try to get whatever this thing is from somewhere outside. And this is why sometimes with Scorpio, we use the words feeling used and abused, because when the underlying motive is to get something that I don't feel like I have right now, once I get the thing I want, the purpose of the relationship for me may be over, especially when we're not conscious about these things. So there can be this series and series of attracting things, merging with them, literally sucking the life out of them to get the thing I want, and then no longer wanting them. This is just one way that Scorpio can show up. It certainly doesn't all the time, but it's a when you see a lot of Scorpio in someone's chart, these dynamics are at play somewhere. And Scorpio by nature is a suspicious sign. It's the detective of the zodiac. So there's nobody better than a Scorpio to sniff out your bullshit. Like, they just know. They psychically, energetically, they just know when something's not quite right, when something's off, when something's not true, somebody's not being real. That energy is not so easy to take when we invert it and look inside ourselves. Because the invitation from Scorpio is to get real. It's to leave no stone unturned. It's truth at all costs. It's being willing to walk the line, hold the line. It's the bottom line with Scorpio. Like, there's kind of no room for anything in between. It can feel like everything's life and death. Everything can feel so intense, and every moment can be just so emotionally intense that, like, at least for the people that in my life that have this type of energy, and I have a lot of Pluto aspects, so I recognize it in myself, and I've observed how people have received me, intensity that just like comes out of your pores, intensity that just energetically sort of I don't know, like, it brings like it brings an intensity just to the energy, even if the person's not saying anything. There's a deep energetic power in Scorpio. And to the extent that we're conscious of it, working with it, allowing it, aligning with it, all these things make all the difference in which direction it goes. So the thing with Scorpio is you really can't just dip your feet in the pool. It's not a skate the surface. It's a deep, deep diver. And even in relationships, Scorpio is, bored to death with just mundane conversation, or people that don't really want to get into anything interesting. And in fact, Scorpio loves to bring up, it's the Scorpio person where you say, oh, you just had to go there. That'd be a Scorpio person, because that energy, it wants to push the buttons. It wants to see how far it can go. It wants to see when something will fall off the edge. It wants to see how firm the boundary really is. It's a penetrating energy. And I mentioned before being like a natural detective. So like a penetrating mind, especially if you have a Mercury in Scorpio, or a Pluto aspect with Mercury, a very penetrating laser-like mind into things. But even if it's not a Mercury connection, there still is a penetrating aspect. It's like you sometimes can feel like you were totally undressed and, I don't know, like rotor-rootered when literally nothing physically happened. Because there's like there's a deep level of um, getting in to see what's there. So in this attraction to greater sources of power, in this sort of search for power, in the ongoing wearing oneself out by pursuing desire after desire after desire, greater power source after greater power source after greater power source, because eventually, and this is just as true. We think about this like when in Buddhism, for example, we talk about like letting go of our desires, right? The elimination of our desires one by one. And we come back to more to what we are, which is not needing anything, whole as we are. Scorpio kind of really does fit into that process. But of course, the process is getting into the desires, right? I mean, you got to get into them before you're gonna let them go. You have to like work them to the end. Scorpio's an all or nothing kind of energy. And if you know anyone with that strong energy in relationships, they don't want a little bit, they want everything. And even everything's not enough. There's a consuming energy. So the attraction to greater forces can be anything, can be to people that seem smarter, people that seem more beautiful, if those are the qualities that I feel like would give me more power or that are desirous to me. It also can be things like, magic and mystery and the occult. There's a huge attraction to that oftentimes for people with strong Scorpio energy. Sex is, of course, is a big one. A lot of power dynamics in sex and testing out power dynamics in sex. And true union and intimacy through sex, which again is one of the natural expressions of the Scorpio archetype, is real intimacy. Two people bearing their souls and their bodies and their minds and coming together, having a union, being truly intimate. You've reached the Scorpio level when you can really just, be yourself around people. If you're still trying to keep up appearances, that's probably still the Libra zone, But once someone's seen you at your worst, they've seen you messy, they've seen you dirty, they've seen you sick, they've seen you, I don't know, you can make up whatever it is, your own little, emotional explosions or implosions. But that's what builds true intimacy, meaning that the vulnerability to allow someone to see you in those moments, those unguarded moments. So I talked about shadow a little bit with Scorpio, and it's such a powerful part of that energy, like shadow dancing, shadow work, all these things that we call around shadow, that we say about shadow, especially those of us who work in, different spiritual circles where shadow work is a big deal. This ultimately is all just coming back to self-love, to loving all the parts of me. We can't change something unless we're intimate with it, unless we have a union with it. Scorpio, it also is very much connect with shamanism, right? The ability to go to different worlds and different places within ourselves, within our psyche, to bring the pieces back together. It's not that they're gone from our overall bigger S self. It's that we have put skeletons in the closet. We have shoved things under the bed, right? We have labeled things as taboo. We have secrets that we don't want people to know, and parts of ourselves that we feel aren't acceptable. Maybe they're so dark and so consuming, or they're just too much for people. That's another good word, another good expression with Pluto and Scorpio, is the feeling that you're just too much. And if you have that strong energy, people actually may have told you that you're too much. But it's impossible when you're being your true self to be too much. So Scorpio is the invitation to come back to that truly, fully empowered self. It takes courage. It takes courage to step into the unknown. And this is one reason why, like, exploring different taboos, why sex and death, because Scorpio ultimately is looking for where, like I was saying earlier, where the edge is, confronting our limits. How far can we really go? And man, at the deepest level, Scorpio needs to feel it to believe it. Scorpio is an experiential, sensation oriented type of energy. It's not enough just to have faith in something. It needs to literally bring that into the body, bring it into the physical, emotional experience so it can be integrated, which is one reason why sex is such a good doorway for this, because it allows that combination of spiritual, emotional, physical energies. So some other good keywords for Scorpio, just in general. Oh, then just like they're not just the detective of the zodiac, just super psychological nature. So Scorpios, even if they have no training in psychology or therapy, they just naturally go there. There's a natural understanding and a desire to know why we do what we do, a fascination with human behavior. Even can even be a morbid fascination with even why we do some of the most perhaps disgusting things, right? There's a fascination with it. In Scorpio, there's a real element of attraction and repulsion, right? Super drawn to something, like, for example, like intimacy, super drawn to be in a bonded, intimate relationship with someone where there is this emotional and physical sexual intensity with them. And at the same time, there's a space of us that is repulsed by it because that would require actually being vulnerable, which, Scorpio can be, tough to get in. I mean, we're talking about fixed water here, which in its elemental form, one of the best ways to look at it is ice. And one of the good examples of this, ice freezes and it becomes a force to be reckoned with. Think about the Titanic and the giant iceberg. Think about ice that becomes immovable. There is this element to Scorpio, but through the willingness to open up and to be really honest, because honesty is an important Scorpio word. Like I said, it's kind of like a no bullshit. Get down to the truth. What is it that you really want? And with ourselves, like, what's my true motivation in this moment? And even if I don't like that motivation, even if I don't like that part of myself, there is a healthy aspect to accepting where I am with it. And in that acceptance and being with that part of me, even if I don't like it, in that very space is where the transformation starts. So this iceberg idea, or ice, you can melt at any time you choose. But the melting is a transformation. It's the same water that was frozen, but now that it's melting, now it can go different places. It can help things to grow in different ways. And there's a place for ice too. So this is not, giving some sort of like bad press to ice. I am just saying that it's easy with the Scorpio archetype and the Scorpio parts of all of us to be sometimes frozen. And when it comes to past trauma and past hurts and past fears of betrayal, fears of abandonment, fears of losing power, fears of just how powerful we actually are and what we might do with our power, because that can be frightening. What can happen is then that the ice wall, the ice wall, it's too much. I don't want to feel it. It's too intense, and Scorpio, oh, wow, the emotional intensity, You could hear someone with strong Scorpio talk about a story and they make it sound like the world was going to end. The drama, when we talk about drama with Leo, but that's just the actor on the stage. I think that's what my teacher, Laura Nell Banding, I believe it was her, she would say, Leo is just the actor on the stage. The real drama comes with Scorpio. And it's true. Absolutely true. Let's see. Well, compulsion, obsession, these lie here too. So Scorpio sometimes can be very compulsive in what it does and how it goes about what it's doing. Also, like hypnotic is a word I would use. There's a seductive, sexy, sexual, hypnotic quality to Scorpio that is sometimes really hard to resist. Like it just invites you in, almost puts you in a trance. It's funny, this morning I got up and I wanted to get myself into more of the Scorpio, I don't know, a state of Scorpio, I guess is the best way to say it. And so for me, Depeche Mode is like the quintessence of Scorpio. Those lyrics, that music to me is very Scorpio. So I put that on my mix and I was just listening all morning. And then I started writing down some of the lyrics because I was just like, wow, these could be a whole book on Scorpio if you put them together. Now, if you don't know much about Depeche Mode, it's a Dave Gahan and Martin Gore are the two members of Depeche Mode, and Martin Gore is the one who has done the majority of all the songwriting. So I was most interested, and I hadn't looked up their charts before. So I was most interested this morning to look up and see, okay, so what's actually going on in his chart? Because there must be a lot of Pluto or Scorpio somewhere. So what we don't know for Martin Gore is his birth time. But he's born July 23rd, 1961 in England. And I ran the chart for 10 a.m. I normally do noon, but I'll tell you why I changed it. Because noon put his moon at 0 degrees Sagittarius. And I would bet you money that he's a Scorpio moon. So I moved it to 10 a.m. and that moved it to 29 degrees Scorpio. It's square Pluto, and he's got Pluto conjunct the North Node. So, you know, one of the great things about looking at celebrities and what they do and put out in the world is we can like see the archetypes come alive in their artistry. And I'll just read you a couple of quotes or song titles here just so you can get a feel of where I'm going with here. So we know there's a song Master and Servant. Well, that certainly fits with the Scorpio energy. Can't Shake the Disease. From the song Somebody, I want somebody who knows my intimate thoughts, my most intimate details. Someone who makes me see things in a different light. The things I detest, I will almost like. Staring down the barrel of a gun. From Blasphemous Rumors, I think that God's got a sixth sense of humor. And we know that Scorpio can be famous for a super dark side of humor. Not always the humor, but definitely a lot of dark comments and ideas can come from that energy. Which means, of course, that if we feel that going on in ourselves, that would make very good sense that we would see a God, if we believed in a God, taking on those similar characteristics. This one especially got me. The song Sister of Night. An eternal flame that burns in desire's name, breaking down your will to move in for the kill. Let me see you stripped down to the bone. Of course, policy of truth. Forbidden fruits for me to eat. Shackled like an animal, chained to my desires. I'm a man of flesh and bone. Rapture rushing through my veins, passion in my heart. My mind is in a state of confusion that I can't allow what I feel. And lastly, there's a song called Judas. And these are some of the lyrics. Risk your health for me, suffer some misery, walk the line for me, open yourself for me, walk on barefoot for me. if you want my love. So that's just one example of also of how I sort of bring astrology into me, right? So my experience this morning of listening to music and actually taking some time to sit down and be with it brought Scorpio into my body and into my being in a different way. Like I felt it more. I mean, I'm a South Node in Gemini. I'm in my head a lot, but it brought me down. It brought me down to feel. And the funny thing is, in that space, I realized listening to that music how important it is for Scorpio to feel and to feel alive. And one of the reasons why I think Scorpio skirts with death and destruction is because in those moments when you're really pushed to the edge, when you're pushed to death, there is no better option to feel alive. Or no, there's no moment where you don't feel more alive. You know, it's like if you've ever had a near death thing happen in your life, think how alive you felt after you realize you made it. See, Scorpio likes the intensity. It wants to feel alive. Now, there can be a self-destructive element in here, which I think can be true with any of us that are feeling so deeply. But at its best, truly, truly at its best, Scorpio is regenerative energy. It's transformative energy. It helps us work together and come together to pool our resources so we can do more. You know, it teaches us how to really be with others and then actually to have a union with them and with life, right? So, oh, there's definitely one thing I definitely want to, oh, for sure. So I didn't mention this, but emotional tethers for sure. I'll tell you a funny story. So years ago, I was dating someone with a Scorpio moon. And when that relationship ended, that person said to me that I had emotionally wrecked them. And I shared that with one of my mentors, and their response was, Scorpio moon wants to be emotionally wrecked. It wants to be pushed to its emotional edges. You may not recognize it in the moment, right? Because it hurts and you don't want the relationship to end or whatnot, but there is a deep desire to feel. In some ways, better to feel something uncomfortable than to feel nothing at all. Scorpio need ultimately, it's the part of us that we need to feel ourselves. We need to feel all of ourselves into the nooks and crannies. You know, with honesty, with openness. There is one of my clients who has a South Node in Scorpio, who didn't realize they had a South Node in Scorpio until we met, because they hadn't looked at evolutionary astrology before, which was super fun. But my client, after our session, sent me a message with a link to a song, and the song is called Twisted. It's by Nahko and Medicine for the People, spelled Nahko, if you want to look it up. And that song, clearly written by someone with a South Node in Scorpio, because as he's singing, he actually says South Node Scorpio. It has lyrics like "The Keeper of the Secrets." It's almost like you can hear that evolutionary journey coming through that music. And it's interesting, and I won't quote this right exactly because I didn't write it down and my memory is not perfect that way. But he talks about how he used to try to do like what his soul work. He wouldn't use that word, but like through his lyrics. He tried to like process this stuff through his lyrics. And then he realized he had to do it through his heart. He had to come back to his self. And it's beautiful, you know, whether or not you like the song or the type of music or not. Like if you're into evolutionary astrology, it's pretty cool that there's South Node Scorpio lyric in a song, and also in that song, and I'm just a geek for correspondence is he also talks about a card. He alludes to a tarot card with 7 swans. And if we take that to mean the 7 of cups, which is a card of temptation and of deep emotional feelings, that card is linked with Scorpio and Venus. So I have just had a number of Scorpio moments recently in real life. And it was such a good reminder to me that Scorpio comes through that, right? It comes through tasting it and smelling it and hearing it and feeling it and becoming part of it. And it's interesting because as I was like going through all this stuff and listening to Depeche Mode and I was in that space, I realized like, whoa, if I'm saying to you and to myself that we only really get stuff if we like bring it in, feel it in our heart, like, feel it in our body, like that's the connection between the mind and body is how we really get something. I just recognized how I have a lot of room to grow in how I allow astrology in. So it was a beautiful experience today for me to welcome Scorpio in that way. And so I'm very thankful that I've chosen to share these things because it's opened a door for me to be with the archetypes in new ways. So I think that's all I have for Scorpio. I mean, I'm sure that I missed a lot of things, but I feel like that's a lot to get us going. And as always, thanks for meeting me here. Whenever you show up in whatever time, like it's just a joy for me to share what I love. And astrology is one of those things. And I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I'm very grateful to you because one of the ways that I receive myself is by putting myself out there. And that's super meaningful to me. And, maybe that's a good Scorpio example because that's like, at least on some level, right? We're coming together to do more. So that's what I want in my life is more partnership that can go to the next level where we can really do things to transform and to make things, I don't like the word better, but more whole, more real, more present for all of us, right? We empower all of us when we each empower ourselves. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take good care. See you next time.